I want to speak about moments. I want to speak about a Jewish understanding of time, about a philosophy of time, which I think is a main piece of Jewish identity. It's not only a new understanding of God, I think it is, Judaism is. It's not only a new understanding of power, I think it is. I think Judaism also offered a new understanding of time. I think those are the three big Jewish ideas created in the Bible, and they started as Jewish ideas and they turned into universal ideas. These are three Jewish gifts to the world. A new understanding of God, a new understanding of power, and a new understanding of time. Now, out of these, in Shabbat, I try to speak a little bit about one of them, right? About God. A new understanding of God. I'd like to speak today, at this moment, about the concept of time, the way, a philosophy of time. And before that, I want to just create, to conceptualize different ways we can think about time, and to create a distinction between linear time and cyclical time. Let's start with cyclical time. Cyclical time would be the following understanding: that every moment is not an original moment, it's not a unique moment. Every moment we experience is a recycled moment, which means this is a moment that happened in the past and will happen in the future. Now, anthropologist Mircea Eliade argues that this is how almost all human beings used to experience time. That every moment is a recycled moment. And every moment will repeat itself again. And the way he understands this is that it comes from the following understanding of the world. And that is that nature is completely cyclical. Our experience of nature is that it repeats itself. You have day, nighttime, and day again, night. You have a hot summer, winter will come, only to make room for another hot summer. Everything is cyclical. Everything repeats itself. Furthermore, if you look at the sky, if you look at the stars, especially, by the way, if you look at the moon, what do you see? How everything constantly repeats itself. So your basic experience of nature is of repetition. I'm not saying that this is what science says. I don't know about that. I'm just saying that the ancient fundamental experience of nature is that it's cyclical. That everything repeats itself. You look at the stars, so the different structures of the stars, they appear again and again, the same structures in different times of the year or years. The sun has the same roots every year. Nature is about repetition. Now, when that's your experience of nature, that's the beginning of our understanding. But you have to add another piece to that. The second piece is that human beings are part of nature. This is something that we don't always believe and not always understand. But human beings are, if you believe that human beings are an extension of nature. By the way, this would mean that if you go hiking in the Grand Canyon and somebody's building a great highway across the Grand Canyon, you can't say, oh no, they're ruining nature. You know why? That highway is a part of nature. Because, you see, if humanity is an extension of nature, so that highway, just like the waterfall, they're all natural phenomena. Now, if that's how you understand life, if that's how you understand the world, so let's put this together. Let's put these two pieces together and create the equation of time. If nature is cyclical and humanity is a part of nature, therefore, humanity is cyclical too. Now, this metaphysics, everything repeats itself. It doesn't mean everything is similar. It means every moment is identical to another moment. According to this metaphysics, this means, okay, let me stop here, try to make a little bit more sense out of this. I want to offer Plato's take on cyclical time. Plato's take on cyclical time is the following. He says that, he writes this in his book, The Laws, that civilization is cyclical in the following way, in the following sense. Civilization grows and accumulates knowledge and therefore power. And it grows and it grows and it grows and becomes more knowledgeable, more powerful, and more sophisticated. And then something always happens. And then there is a catastrophe. And what this catastrophe does, it erases all achievements of humanity, including the memory of humanity. And after everything is erased, they start all over again. And they grow in sophistication and knowledge and power until catastrophe happens, erases all achievements of humanity, all knowledge, all accumulated knowledge of humanity, including the memory of humanity. And then this process will happen again. Now, according to this understanding, to this theory, which Plato is trying to conceptualize rationally what everyone thought anyway, this means we've already achieved internet, right? We didn't just, oh my God, we already achieved internet. We already had Facebook. But why does it seem so fresh and new to us? Because not only was that achievement destroyed, but the memory of that achievement was destroyed. By the way, according to this metaphysics, how many times did we achieve Facebook in the past? But, let's make this even worse. How many times did I give this class to you?
I don't remember.
Here's the thing. We've been here before. I gave this before. This is not an original moment. This is a recycled moment. But the thing is, for all of us, lucky me, for all of us, this is fresh. Why is it fresh? Not because it didn't happen, but because the memory of the event was erased. This is the understanding of cyclical time. And if you think, I know it's hard to comprehend this, but if you comprehend the two pieces of the equation, that nature is cyclical and we are part of nature, therefore everything that happens to human beings is everything that already happened. And will happen. By the way, this means how many times will you hear this class from me? Many more times. Good luck. Many more times. But don't worry, every time you'll feel like it's the first. So this is the concept of cyclical time. What is the concept of linear time? The concept of linear time, and there's other concepts, I just want to introduce this one. The concept of linear time is the concept that here's how Heschel, by the way, do you know that Heschel, there is a YouTube with the interview with Heschel? Yep, there is. In 1972, there's an interview with Abraham Joshua Heschel, and you should watch this YouTube. Like, this is we don't have a YouTube with the Rambam. But we have with Heschel from 1972, and he has this great definition for linear time. And he says, it's to believe that no moment is similar to another moment. Was that an attempt to imitate Heschel? He has something German going from him. I don't think I could do that. So linear time is to understand and comprehend that no moment is similar to another moment. That every moment is completely and radically unique. By the way, that means that if next year, forget next year, if tomorrow you cancel your flights and you'll come here and sit in the same places, wear the same clothes, I deliver the same class, try to repeat the same jokes, we try to repeat this moment, we would fail. You know why? Even if it would be the same words, the same everything, it would be a completely different moment. This moment, it will be impossible to replicate. No moment is similar to another moment, which is terrifying, by the way. It's terrifying because it means time leaves us and you can't hold on to it. So we try to, take pictures. We try to, but it's almost pathetic. We'll always fail. You can't ever get that moment back. No moment is similar to another. So we have two concepts of time, of cyclical time, where every moment is a repetition of moments in the past and will be repeated in the future, and linear time, where moments are original, are unique, are singular. We have two concepts of time. Now, many people think that the notion of linear time was an invention of the Bible. Thomas Kyle writes a book, The Gifts of the Jews, and the gift of the Jews is linear time. Why is that a invention of the? How does that understanding of time? How is that being born in the Bible? Maybe we'll soon read some text, but I want to first understand conceptually how this works. When people believed that human beings are an organic part of nature, and because nature is cyclical, so our experience is cyclical too, even if we don't know that and experience it that way, it comes from a belief of a deification of nature. Nature is divine. Nature contains all the divine forces. And if nature contains all the divine powers, and we're an extension of that, so everything is cyclical, nature is cyclical there, and if nature is cyclical, everything is cyclical, and if everything is cyclical, we're cyclical too. But then the Bible comes along, and what was the radical revolution of the Bible? The understanding that we separate God from nature. The separation of God from nature is the essence of monotheism. Monotheism is not only a mathematical trick, it's not only shrinking the amount of gods, it's not only moving from many to one, it's something more interesting and more radical. It's not only saying that God, I'll say this in Hebrew, זה לא רק שהאל אחד הוא מיוחד. In English we lost the pun. It's not only saying that God is one, it's saying that God is unique, is radically different. I'll use a word now, it's completely transcendent. It's over and above and beyond the world in our experience, beyond what we could imagine. The radical otherness of God is something that started to become established in the Bible. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. That itself is a statement. If He created heaven and earth, what does that mean? He's not heaven and earth. The opening declaration of the Bible also expresses the great revolution of the Bible. Now, why is this important? For the following reason. If God is separate from nature and human beings are in the image of God, therefore, there is a separation between humanity and nature, and therefore, nature could be cyclical, but humanity is not trapped in those cycles. Therefore, we have linear time. Did you follow this move? Should I say this again? Okay. I forgot it. Next moment. So let me try to put all the pieces together, okay? So, cyclical time comes from a belief that nature is divine, and therefore nature contains everything, including humanity. Therefore, if nature is cyclical, everything we experience is cyclical. Therefore, you've heard this lesson many times. Okay? Monotheism comes around. Separate gods from nature. Therefore, nature doesn't contain everything. God is separated from nature. And then the second biblical revolution happening also in chapter 1 of Genesis, human beings are created in the image of God. Human beings are similar to the God that is not similar to nature. So what we've achieved here is a separation. The product of God being separated from nature is humanity not being a part of nature, which means if you go to the Grand Canyon and somebody is building a highway, the highway is not nature, it's ruining nature. Humanity is not a part of nature. It's an intervention in nature. It's not a part of nature. And if human beings are not a part of nature, therefore nature could be cyclical, but human beings are not a part of those cycles. Which means we have linear time and no moment, and moments become completely unique. Okay? So from a new understanding of God, derives a new understanding of time. Now this is radical, because when you have a concept of cyclical time, you don't have a concept of a future. You understand that? Because if you have cyclical time, that means time, when you're moving to the future, actually, where are you moving at the same time? To the past. It would be like, it's easy for us to think about this when we think about space. The best metaphors for time come from space, because it's hard to think about time, and it's easy to imagine space. It's impossible to imagine time. It's a problem we have. Close your eyes, imagine time, you'll fail. But space, we can imagine. So let's use a metaphor. So you get on an airplane in Ben Gurion Airport. And you start traveling to the west. And let's say you have enough fuel in the airplane. Even if it's, United. You have enough fuel in the air. And you go, okay, let's say it's OL, because we're patriots. So you go, for hours, for days towards the west. Well, eventually, where will you end up? Back in Ben Gurion. It's a flight to nowhere. Cyclical experiences is always a move back to where you are. You don't move forward. Imagine time as cyclical. The move to the future is a move to the past at the same time. There is no future. And Eliade argues, in the ancient times, people did not have a concept of future, which Thomas Kyle argues, the gift of the Jews is the future. We invented the future. The notion that there is a future. I once said this in Hebrew and I got in trouble because I said, Yesh Atid. What? It literally means there is a future. It's also a name of a political party in Israel. So I was promoting Yesh Atid. Usually people call it Yesh Lapid, so it's easier. But there, Yesh Atid, there is a future. So once God is not a part of nature and human beings are in the image of God, therefore they're separated from nature, then time is unleashed and a future begins. And the future is not a repetition of the past, and therefore it's terrifying. Because if the future is not a repetition of the past, what's going to happen? And we all know that we don't know. We have no idea. And you have to live anyone who lives in the Middle East knows that nothing is predictable. Actually, lately, even if you live in the United States of America, you know that not anything could happen. That when pundits sit and analyze what's going to happen based on everything that happens, they almost always can't get it right. The condition of humanity is to be constantly shocked and surprised by the uniqueness of the moment, by the fact that the past does not predict the future. This is the result of monotheism, which creates linear time, which actually means that there is here's how a disciple of Spinoza offers the experience of time. He says, time is like, I'll have to get up now. It's like you're walking, it's the opposite of space. When I walk, can you hear me? So when I walk, I see everything that's going to happen, right? But time is like walking backwards. Because what do I see? Everything that happened, but what can't I see? I can't see what's going to happen. It's like time is like walking backwards. You only see where you've walked, but you can't see where you're going to walk. And this is what we always try to do. We try to learn from what we've experienced, that what we're going to experience, and, doesn't always work. There's a great, so if one of the new ideas that the Bible brought to the world that changed the future was the idea that there is a future. I think that was a good line. It just happened. Actually, not just now. It probably happened a few times before. Now, just to experience a rhythm of cyclical time, let me just check the time. I'd like to read one chapter from Ecclesiastes, a quick chapter from Ecclesiastes, to experience cyclical time. Ecclesiastes is this chapter is in the Bible, and it offers an alternative, a theological alternative to the Bible. You see Ecclesiastes chapter 1, it's on page 1. So if anybody will be generous enough to read, so I won't have to read, I'll be very grateful. Chapter 1. What? That's not a problem. Please.
The words of Kohelet, son of David, king of Jerusalem. Utter futility, said Kohelet, utter futility. All is futile. What real value is there in man and all the things he makes beneath the sun? One generation goes, another comes, but the earth remains the same forever. The sun rises and the sun sets, and glides back to where it rises, southward blowing, turning northward. Ever turning blows the wind. On its rounds the winds return. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place from which they flow, the stream flows back again. All such things are wearisome. No man can ever state them. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear enough of hearing. Only that shall happen which has happened. Only that occur which has occurred. There is nothing new beneath the sun.
Let's stop here. He's using natural metaphors to explain his concept of time. And he's saying, you see, the sun rises, it sets, only to rise again and set again, only to rise again and set again. The wind, they used to believe that the wind goes from south to north, and the wind is cyclical. The water, it rains, it drops, going to the river goes to the sea, just to evaporate, to turn to clouds, to turn into rain, to go back to the sea. It's cyclical. Nothing moves. Everything moves in cycles. And then he says, you read beautifully, And then he says, only that shall happen which has happened. Only that occur which has occurred. I think the power of this chapter, he's saying, sun is cyclical, wind is cyclical, water is cyclical. Everything that happened will happen. Everything that occurred shall occur. This is a chapter that argues, that claims that everything repeats itself, and obviously this chapter itself all the time repeats itself, which is the power of this chapter. Everything that happened shall happen. Everything that occurred will occur. There's nothing new beneath the sun. It repeats itself while claiming that everything repeats itself. This is a perfect unity between the content of the chapter and the structure of the chapter, trying to enable us readers not only to understand that time is cyclical, but also to experience the rhythm of repetition, of cyclical time. So here we have a representation of the concept, and this concept of cyclical time in Ecclesiastes. And Ecclesiastes is a book in the Tanakh, in the Bible. Now this is something that is worth thinking about a lot. How is it that the Bible contains inside it a voice that challenges the theology of the Bible? How is that? Well, one explanation is that the Bible is not afraid to listen to voices that are different than its main voice. This is biblical pluralism. The fact that the main theology of the Bible is linear time, it derives from monotheism, and it makes room for a critique of linear time. It doesn't only listen to the alternative, it gives voice to the alternative and makes the alternative sacred. It's a part of the Bible. I think this is a great lesson about that the Bible teaches us about listening. But this is, I love this chapter, so I wanted us to enjoy it for a minute. But this is not the dominant voice of the Bible. The dominant voice of the Bible, I would say we would see in page number 5. Page number 5, we have Genesis 8. And how Noah and human beings have to deal with the new world after the old world was destroyed. How do you start all over again? And you'd assume that the world, the biblical narrative is like this, right? The world is created, destroyed, and then starts all over again. And you would assume, if you're part of that generation, part of that mythology, the world was created, destroyed in the flood, and now we're starting all over again, that you would think that what's going to happen in a few generations? We're destroyed again, just like Plato's theory, right? So what happens right after the flood, right after it starts? What does God tell Noah? Noah, I think you call him. What does God tell Noah? It's never going to happen again. Which means it's a declaration of linear time, right? It's exactly the opposite of Ecclesiastes. He's saying what happened will not happen. That the past is not a key to understand the future. That the world was destroyed once, but it's never going to be destroyed again. And the interesting thing, now this is something I can't share with you through the English translation. So you'll have to work with me in the Hebrew translation. They're using here a word, a powerful word. And so if it's okay, I want to read verse 4 I mean, it's not verse 4. What? Source 4, thank you. So in Genesis 8, and if you see, it's Genesis 8, and I want to read the last verse of it, verse 22, Kaf Bet. And break your teeth and do it with me in Hebrew, okay? This is how God promises that there'll never be a destruction again. This is the words he uses. He says, Od kol yemei haaretz, so long as the earth endures. Zera v'katzir, seed time and harvest. V'kor v'chom, cold and heat. V'kaitz v'chorif, summer and winter. V'yom v'layla, day and night. Lo yishbotu. The translation shall not cease. But I want to listen to the rhythm of this. Day and night, cold and heat, summer and winter. This will never stop. What is he saying? The cyclical nature of nature will never stop again. But he uses the word to say it will never stop. He uses the word Shabbat. Lo yishbotu means, lishbot means, it doesn't mean to stop. It means something else. What does Shabbat mean in biblical Hebrew? Well, rest is also a translation. I think it's a very unique word, but we all know where it comes from. It comes from creation, right? God creates the world, and then who had a Shabbat? Who performed that act of stopping Shabbat? God. So here we have now two worlds. We have God that performs Shabbat, and we have nature which constantly violates the Sabbath. That's what nature does. It has no Shabbat. God has Shabbat. Nature lo yishbotu. Which means when Exodus chapter 20 comes along and commands us to lishbot, to have Shabbat, to stop, what does that commandment mean? It means you're on the side of God and not of nature. You are not trapped in cycles of getting up in the morning, going to work, making a living, only to come home, fight with your wife. Just kidding. Yeah. Going through those struggles of life, which are cyclical and distress, one day. Now, you're separated from those cycles. One day, that day of Shabbat is the declaration of human independence from nature. That's why this is something you couldn't capture in English. Because it says that nature does not have Shabbat. Lo yishbotu. Creating the contrast between nature and the creator of nature. Which means that when human beings have Shabbat, that's a declaration. Shabbat is a declaration that separates humanity from nature. I want to think about this declaration. There's an interesting Israeli thinker called Yuval Noah Harari. Actually, he wrote a book which was a bestseller in English too. You know this book? Sapiens. Sapiens. You read this? So he has a great description of how people's experience used to be cyclical. It says like this. Okay, you wake up in the morning and now you have to take your body to work the ground in order to produce enough calories to feed your body so that body will be able to work the ground just in order to create enough calories. So it's constantly, your experience is cyclical. You're working to stay alive and healthy, but you have to be alive and healthy so you could work and produce what you need. So it's a cyclical experience. Because I think this is a great description of the reality in the ancient world. The ancient world, we were controlled by the forces of nature, and economically speaking, We were trapped in cycles because we were controlled by the greater forces of nature. So what is Shabbat in this world? What is Shabbat? Shabbat is, I'm declaring my independence. For one day, I'm not going to work to create the calories, so the next day I'll be able to have a strong enough body to go to work. I'm not a part of that. Shabbat is the 4th of July of humanity. It's the declaration of independence of humanity from nature. But I like to think about this concept a little bit more. Because it's very possible that the Jewish revolution in the ancient world was separation of humanity from nature, discovering our independence, our Shabbat, our independence, creating linear time and making room for future. But I think modernity, is Judaism still, that created that revolution back then, is Judaism still relevant in modern times? At least this idea in Judaism? I'm in the sun. I think I have to move a little bit. It's only me in the sun, right? Yeah. It'll be okay if I get closer to you guys? Okay. No, it's just, I'm probably not good. Okay. Like, can I sit here? No, just kidding. No, okay. I think this is okay. Okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you. I feel at home. Thank you. Toda. You guys have these cool bags. They didn't give me one. So I should go find a bag, a Hartman bag to be. Okay, so you look different from here, I hope. Yeah. So where was I? Okay. Oh, I was in Jonathan Sacks. Jonathan Sacks wrote a great book called Radical Then and Radical Now. Trying to say, what is Judaism? There's many ways to think about Judaism. And whoever was here in Shabbat, they offered Amos Oz definition of Judaism. Judaism is a community, but a multi-generational community. And belonging to Judaism is to belong to a community. But the members of the community are not only your generation. That's a great definition, but there's many definitions. Here's Jonathan Sacks in one of his books. He says, maybe Judaism is not a mishpacha, it's not a community, it's a movement. It's a movement protesting against the powerful establishments of humanity. It's a radical movement. And as he says, it was radical then, and it's radical now. So I think we've established why it was radical then. It goes to a world that thinks that humanity is an extension of nature, and therefore you are the slave of nature. Political establishments made the most out of this manipulation, and then Judaism comes along, invents a future, liberates us from nature, liberates us from being slaves to these cycles, and it was a radical movement then. Is it radical now? Well, seems like this idea cannot be radical now. Why? Because our relationship with nature has changed. In the ancient world, two things defined our relationship, our emotional connection to nature. One, we knew that nature is extremely powerful. Two, we know that we can't control those powers. And as a result, we're powerless. If there'll be an earthquake, it's the end. If there'll be famine, it's the end. If there'll be a shitafon, a flood, it's the end. We're completely dependent on nature. But then civilization develops. And the development of civilization could be understood the following way. Science develops. Science is our attempt to understand nature, to understand the hidden laws of nature. But from science, we move to technology. What's the distinction between science and technology? What? If science is about understanding, technology is about controlling. And the movement from the knowledge we accumulate from science that technology is the most elegant move from knowledge to power. I move from understanding to controlling, from having knowledge to obtaining power. And technology, the more it accumulates, it radically changes, transforms the relationships between us and nature. Because it seems like we used to live, there is day and night. And then suddenly, there isn't day and night anymore. You know why? Because when the day ends, we still have light. We live in artificial day. And then we move from the spring to the summer, but not really. Why? We're still in the spring. And then we move from the summer. In Israel, there's no fall. So I'm just going to the winter. And guess what? Our body still experiences spring. Nature is not something we experience. It's something we observe. It's out there. It's beautiful. I know sometimes when you have to move from the office to your car, you get wet a little bit. You're like that. That's true. But now this obviously, as you know, if there's famine, we'll still have what to eat. If there'll be floods, we'll get over it. But it's not only that technology redeemed us from the control of nature over us. Technology is starting to take over nature. And we have more and more control over nature. It seems like what modernity did, it reversed the power structure. If in old times nature controlled us, in our new times it seems like we control nature, or at least our experience of nature. Now the equation power reversing itself. So do we need monotheism and Judaism to liberate humanity from nature? Do we need a new metaphysic to do that? Technology does that for us. So back to the question, it was radical then. Is it relevant now? Is it relevant now? Maybe it is. I'd like to offer a thought and then develop it a little bit. There's I have a lot of conversations about this with Salzinger. I'm sure you all know the situation where you go to a park and you see all the kids, they're alive. And their eyes are open, and they're curious, and they're fighting, and they're climbing, and everything is exciting for them. And all the parents are sitting on a bench, and while the kids are alive, the world is big, and they're challenged. What are the parents doing? They're like this. Their brain is 3/4 dead. They're like this, and obviously of course they're davening, and obviously. When we have that moment when, as my sister-in-law observed, that we do, is that we feel guilty for doing that because we all know, we've all read that kids need us to look at them. They just need us to look at them, and we're not. So we obviously overcompensate. So when there's a moment, oh, beautiful, we overcompensate and we're pathetic. And that, this is a moment we all know. We all know. And this is obviously, these kind of moments are now lately investigated. What happens to children? What happens to grown-ups? What happens to us that we are addicted to our smartphones? What happens to us? What happens to us when we know, for example, that every moment, which was a great moment, we have to capture it and share it. And if we didn't capture the moment and share the moment, it didn't really happen. That moment didn't happen. And by the way, it gets worse. So you capture the moment and you share the moment, and now anxiety kicks in. What's the anxiety? What's the feedback going to be? Are people going to observe this? Are people going to send me hearts? Yeah. Is that going to happen? So here's a new philosophical question. A moment that was not shared on Facebook, did it happen? Did it happen? So There's a great book I think I recommend. It's a book called by David Brooks, The Road to Character. You read this book? So he has, I read the first chapter. By the way, almost all the books I read was only, it's enough to quote it. So, at the back, you read the, so he says 17-year-old Americans, samples of 17-year-old Americans are today, they measure their level of narcissism. And this is how you level. You get a questionnaire and you say from 1 to 10, how much does this line resonate with you? From 1 to 10, and there's some amazing lines there. 17-year-old kids, here's one of them. I'm a very special person. You're 17, from 1 to 10. How much? Oh, and here's my personal favorite. Someone should write a book about me. This is true, from 1 to 10. And that's how they somehow measure levels of narcissism. And David Brooks quotes a research saying that in the past 30 years, the average of narcissism is up 20%. And this leads Brooks to coin the following phrase. He says, we enter the age of narcissism. You see, it used to be that only celebrities manage their public image and experience the gap between their public image and who they are. And as we know, celebrities, that creates a lot of psychological stress and problems for celebrities. But today, who has to carry those problems? Everyone. We're all managing and we're all so. But narcissism is only one piece. Empathy is the second piece. Empathy, that very, very unique human ability not to understand what you're saying, but to feel what you're feeling. To feel what you're feeling. And some of us are good at that. Some of us are great at that. Some of us are not that good. It's that talent that maybe that's the talent that makes us human. I have a friend which is, I would say in that IQ, he's a genius. He's like Albert Einstein. And once I was very angry that morning for a certain reason. You're not supposed to be angry, so I'm supposed to hide it because I'm cool. And I meet him and I say, hey, how's it going? And he says, Micha, are you angry? And I said, no, I'm not. Why do you think so? And that's what he says to me. He says, well, I feel anger and I know it's not mine, so maybe it's yours. So I think some of us are very, by the way, this is a guy, I never want to be next to him anymore. It's always, wherever I see him, I try to, because you feel but this is, so empathy, that ability to experience what the other experiences. I think the base of the ethical, the whole premise of biblical ethics is about empathy. It's about my ability not to understand what you're saying, but to feel what you're feeling. And ethics comes from when I feel your pain, then I'll do everything I can for you to help you through your pain, because who am I helping by doing that? It's my pain. It's empathy. It's the foundation of biblical ethics. What's happened to empathy now? So empathy is created by the fact that we look at each other, listen to each other, spend time with each other, read each other's body language. But when we communicate through texts, what happens to empathy? So here, Sherry Turkle, probably the #1 researcher in the world about what these vehicles do to our psyche. She says, in average, our abilities to create empathy are down 40%. So when empathy is down and narcissism is up, let's say now I want to try to understand the history of a relationship with nature. So we were controlled by nature, and we invent technology, and the power of technology accumulates, and suddenly we're in control of nature, or you have an illusion of control of nature, and we're liberated. But then we realize that we're controlled by technology. So ironically, we're controlled by the instruments that we created to be in control. We're not controlled by nature, we're controlled by what we created to control nature. I think if Judaism in the ancient world was about liberating ourselves from nature, maybe Judaism today is to help us liberate ourselves from technology. Is that a radical idea? I want to think about this for a minute. How am I doing time-wise? 5 to 10. We have till 10:30. So with questions. Okay, so I'll try to. Now, and if the notion of Shabbat in the ancient world was about a declaration, I'm not controlled by nature, maybe Shabbat today could be, I'm not controlled by what we created to control nature. Maybe that's what Shabbat could be about today. Maybe Shabbat still is about liberation, still is about discovering our humanity. Because in the ancient world, it wasn't clear that there is a distinction between humanity and nature. More and more it will seem like that in our world, it's hard to create a distinction between human beings and technology. And this is only going to get more and more complicated. We're only at the beginning. So if Shabbat was radical then, and we thought it's not radical because of technology, because technology already liberated ourselves from nature, maybe we need Shabbat to liberate ourselves from what we created to liberate ourselves from nature. Am I clear? So first I want to think about Shabbat in that sense. And the relevance of Judaism is it's an ancient idea that was radical then. Protecting, guarding the independence of humanity from nature. I think it's radical now, but not from nature anymore. It's from everything we did to declare independence from nature. We have to be independent. And how is Shabbat? Now this is a lot of room for thought. How could Shabbat help us with that? How can these ideas help us with that? I like to go back to think about concepts of time. To quote Gilbert Ryle, if you were living, beforehand, I want to move back and offer, we're speaking about time, and I didn't define time. It's hard to define time. It's hard to create a definition. The sun is, sorry, I'm getting closer to you guys. So it's hard to offer so Aristotle makes I don't know if he's true metaphysically, but it's definitely true psychologically. So this is Aristotle's definition of time. Time is the number that measures change. There's a strong linkage between time and change. If you think about it, periods of our life where not a lot happens, we didn't experience a lot of time then. But when a lot happens, we experience a lot of time. So I don't know if metaphysically this works, but as far as our experience, this definitely works. And in light of this, I would like to think about what is modernity. I want to offer a definition to modernity. So Ryle says like this. Imagine a human being living in where Ireland is today in the 9th century. Now that human being, I want you to imagine that human being, how he or she are closing their eyes, imagining the future 400 years from now. So a person, the 9th century, a person in the past, how does that person imagine the future 400 years from now? How does that person imagine the future? It's actually pretty easy for that person to imagine the future, because how is he or she imagining the future of the 9th century? Pretty much the same. It's not saying that before modernity the world didn't change, but it was experienced as a static world, a world that doesn't change. By the way, when that person imagines the past 400 years beforehand, how does that past look like? Just like the present. What we used to do was take the moment of the present and use that to paint the past and to paint the future. Biblical heroes in the Middle Ages were like, abirim. They were knights. They were knights. Abraham was a knight. Why is that? Because the way things are today, that's how the past looked like. That's how the future looked like. I'm not saying time didn't change, but they perceived time as completely stable, as static. That's how the world looked like. Now, I don't even try to ask you all to do this. Close your eyes. Imagine the world 400 years from now. Because it's terrifying, because I would ask you to do that 40 years from now. You would panic, and of course you would, because if we try to imagine the world 4 years from now, how will the Middle East look like 4 years from now? What will Europe be 4 years from now? Who will the United States of America be 4 years from this 4th of July? I just got to tell you something. As an Israeli, when I always used to be in American groups and Israel in our politics, I used to be a little bit embarrassed. Not anymore. So I feel very comfortable now with you all. Just wanted to share that. No, that's not empathy. That's joy. Just kidding. What? Okay, so that's the opposite of empathy. Yes. I know I have an I'm sorry. It's these issues I have to. Now, why is it that we can't imagine the world 1 year from now? It's because the world is changing so quickly. As Ray Kurzweil put it, change itself is changing. Exponentially. Here's a definition maybe of humanity, of modernity. The greatest change that the world went through in modern times is change itself. The fact that the world is changing is the greatest change. Or the fact that we experience the world is changing is the greatest change. And in light of that, and if I go back to Aristotle, if time is linked to change, what really happened is it's suddenly a lot of time. We experience so much time. So here's my definition of modernity I'd like to offer. We all know about theories of globalization. And the greatest articulation of globalization, a popular articulation, was stated by Thomas Friedman. He says, globalization is when the category of space vanishes. Space used to mean everything. You move from one village, you walk 100 miles to the next village, there's another accent, another dialect. Different foods are served. Different identities are created. Different space means a whole different world. Today, wherever you go, you're always at the same place. That's the notion of the category of space vanishing. And if I'm looking for a job and I live in Bombay and you live in Tel Aviv and someone else lives in Manhattan and we could all apply for the same job and stay at the same place, that means maybe the notion of space doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, and if I could speak simultaneously with my friend in South Africa and Australia space doesn't exist. Here's what I'd like to offer, but that's only one piece. I think in a very deep sense, modernity is the following trade-off. Space shrunk, time expanded. It's that, it used to be Australia is a different universe. Now Australia is here. It used to be that next year was like tomorrow. Now next year is a few centuries away. So what was very far, space-wise, is very close. You guys are getting on a plane today, the next day you'll be in a different continent. So what was far is close. But what used to be close, 400 years from now, used to be just like now, is now infinitely very far. So modernity, all modernity did, we always speak about one part of the equation by changing space, by shrinking space. What we don't always think about is the trade-off. We traded space for time. So if monotheism was about creating the future, modernity is about an accelerated future. Modernity is monotheism on steroids. It's linear time on steroids. We don't need a class on Genesis to know that this moment is extremely unique. And next year, God knows who we will be, where we will be, how we will be. We know that. We know that moments are unique. So I think the sun, no. So with this working, does this definition resonate of modernity? We traded time for space. Sorry, space for time. Space almost vanished, and time expanded. Where next year is very far away. So much could happen. I assume so much will happen. I mean, do you remember that 2014 in Israel there was a war in Gaza? A lot has happened since then. What will happen in 2018? I don't know. A lot's going to happen. It's very far away, but the United States is so close. Pretty soon, other planets will be close. I mean, what's happening is the more time expands, so space shrinks. Which takes me to my last observation I want to share with you about a Jewish understanding of time. When I said that Judaism created the future and the notion of unique moments, well, there's another piece to this. And that is Judaism also offers us a calendar. And what do we have in this calendar? We have Sukkot, right? And Passover. It's not biblical, but Hanukkah. And how is next year's Sukkot going to look like? The same. We're back in our sukkah. It will be the same ritual. It will be... So on the one hand, metaphysically, you have linear time, but your calendar is cyclical. Now, why is this combination important? Well, maybe, so I want to offer, you have room for one last move, so to speak? Because I know the irony that I'm running out of time.
You're okay. 10:05.
Yeah, but questions and what?
We'll give you 15 minutes of our break.
Yeah, no, but there's questions and so I'd like to offer a different understanding of an Israeli scholar of fundamentalism. Fundamentalism that's rising all around the world is a result of us panicking from the world changing so much. Now, we all know that the reason for anxiety is uncertainty. And the more the world changes, the less certain it is, the more we panic. And what is the great reward that fundamentalists offer us? What is fundamentalism? Denial of change. Denial of change. Yeah, I don't want to speak against our Haredi brothers. I don't. I just want to share. What?
Why not?
Because I don't. And so, but I meet I share this with some of people in Shabbat. And I meet a Haredi in the summer of Jerusalem. And he's all dressed for winter. That's what they do. They're all dressed for winter. Like the big coat and the furs and everything in the winter. And I somehow asked him, hey, it's summer and, And why are you dressed that way? And he said, well, in Kelks, which I guess is a city in Eastern Europe, this is how we used to dress. But my response was, but it was snowing. But after that interaction, something in me admired him. Because he's a walking protest against humanity. In the way he dresses, he was saying something. I am not from here. I am from a different place and especially from a different time. That's the impulse of fundamentalism. Saying that I'm freezing things the way they were right before everything went crazy. And you see, the more there's change, the more there's anxiety, the more the temptation of going back to a time and freezing it. See, we always ask, how could he be a fundamentalist in modern times? That's a misunderstanding. It's modernity and it's change that increases the temptation to freeze change, to deny humanity. Now, the only difference between our Haredim, which are my brothers, and, for example, ISIS, is how do you react to modernity? And the impulse of our Haredim is to shut yourself down and to close yourself from modernity. ISIS has a different way of dealing with it. Instead of closing or guarding ourselves from humanity, is to destroy it. Which, by the way, I'm on camera, so I'm always afraid of having my jokes taken out of context. I got in trouble a few times. But let's put it this way. There's two different ways of dealing with you're afraid of something, right? Either you escape it or you try to attack it or destroy it. The Haredi impulse was trying to escape it. I could respect that. ISIS and others, their impulse is to destroy it. But both are panicking, both. And we can understand why they're panicking. Now, maybe okay, I'll take a chance now. I want to share a joke with you. Okay? It's a joke about Aristotelian times. Maybe, okay. What? Okay. So, 40-year-old businessman finishes his tough day, goes up to the 17th floor in one of those tall buildings in Tel Aviv. It's a hard day, takes his jacket off, pours himself some single malt whiskey. He's sipping away, enjoying, and then suddenly, here's a knock on the door. I hope this works in English, okay? So he comes, he opens the door, he looks around. No one's there. So he closes the door, he goes back to his single malt, and then obviously knocks again. I'll save you all the round. He comes, he opens the door, he looks around, and then suddenly he hears a little voice. Down here, down here. So he looks down, he sees a lizard. Wow, this is based on a true story. So the lizard looks at him and he says, "Get out of my house. This is my house. Get out of my house. I bought it." It's just happened. So he takes the lizard and just throws it all the way down. Okay, so the guy goes through life, has a few marriages. His business is bankrupt. He goes back. It's got a very intensive, life filled with change. Experiences a lot of time. Now he's 75. After 4 marriages, after a very intense life, the end of the day, takes his jacket off, sits down, pours himself some single malt whiskey, starts sipping, and suddenly what happens? Knock on the door. So he goes and he opens, there's no one there. Okay, I'll say the whole thing. Finally, he goes, he opens the door, and he hears a voice. He looks down, he sees a lizard. And the lizard says to him, "What just happened now?" Okay, thank you. And in Hebrew is actually saying, "Maya ketaz achshav." Okay, what just happened now? Now, I want to analyze Aristotle. This is the best way to do a joke. You analyze a joke using Aristotle categories, okay? That's the best way. So what was the difference between the two? What did the lizard experience the past 40 years? The same thing, right? For him, it was just now. For this person, it was a different lifetime. You see, when America and Al-Qaeda clash, so Bin Laden used to say, and his followers say, you are crusades. You are crusades. For them, the crusades it's like, what just happened now? What was just thing you just did now in the crusades? And for America, that's like, It's so far away, it was someone else. Has nothing to do with us. One could say that the clash between the United States and radical Islam is a clash between two concepts of time, where you experience rapidly change. Everything changes. So there's a lot of time. And the Crusades, 9/11 is like far away now. It's nothing to do with us anymore. But for fundamentalists, what is very far is very near, time-wise. I'm using all this to amplify the notion that the more the world changes, the more anxiety is created, and the more the temptation, the fundamentalist temptation grows. And I want to return, because I think Judaism offers us that combination of linear time, but a cyclical calendar. And I think in the ancient world, the linear part was important. Maybe in our world, the cyclical calendar is important. And here's why. In a world filled with anxiety, inflated with change, we're all sitting here knowing that we don't know what's going to happen next year. But there's one thing we do. We'll be in the same sukkah. There's one thing we do. We'll light the same candles in Hanukkah. Say the same bracha in Hanukkah. In some way, cyclical calendar enables you to return to a familiar moment in a world where nothing is familiar anymore. Maybe in the ancient world, Judaism was radical because it offered the notion that moments are different. Maybe in today's world, we need Judaism because it creates moments that are similar, that are familiar. And maybe we need, these are the two observations I wanted to share. Judaism had this very interesting revolution understanding of time, linear time, but experiencing a cyclical calendar. Linear time means we liberate ourselves from nature. I'd like to offer that today Judaism is relevant. The concepts of time are relevant for two different reasons. One reason is that we have to liberate ourselves not from nature, but from our own power, but from what we developed to control nature. Back then, it was about nature. Today, maybe it might be about technology. But I think the notion of Shabbat that in the ancient world we used to liberate ourselves from nature, maybe that's the notion that we need today to liberate ourselves from technology. That's one thought. And the other thought, Judaism used to be about the world does change. Now the world changes too much. Maybe to balance that world, we don't need the notion of linear celebration of linear time. It's way too linear. Maybe we need Judaism today because of its cyclical calendar. Because it offers moments, it offers stable moments in a very unstable world. Okay. Okay, there's quite a few questions. How about I'll start from, are you left-wingers or right-wingers? What? I don't know who that was. Okay, please.
I buy into linear time, and I think there's a corollary to it. I think that the word progress has never come up in anything we talked about. What I mean by progress is that the world is getting better. And I think that's what the Jewish Bible tells us as well. You'd like to comment?
Yeah, I just personally am not a great believer in progress. I'm a believer in opportunities. I think what the Bible says doesn't say that the world is necessarily day by day getting a better place. I'm saying if we push it to optimistic directions, it will. I think progress as a form of determinism is a 19th century concept. And I think the Bible is not saying the world will always, every day that passes will be better. I think the Bible says the opposite. As Eli Shvaid, an Israeli intellectual analyzes the Bible the following way. Every day that passes, we have more power. Because power accumulates. But ethics doesn't. Now that sucks. Because the fact that I was a good person today, tomorrow, it's not like, let's say when it comes to knowledge. So I read a book today, tomorrow I'll read another book, I accumulate knowledge, and since knowledge is power, every day that passes, I can accumulate knowledge. But let's say I was a good person today, tomorrow, it's not like, wow, I have everything I achieved yesterday, plus what I'll achieve tomorrow. Ethics, you can't accumulate it. Next day, I could screw the whole thing up. So this asymmetry between my ability to accumulate power and my lack of ability to accumulate ethics is creating a world where there's an asymmetry between our amount of power and amount of ethics. By the way, this is the asymmetry that's threatening our world. And I think the Bible was very aware that progress is in power and not in ethics.
I don't mean it on a personal scale, I mean in the great arc of history.
I think this is arc of history. I think we progress in power and not necessarily in ethics. And there is an asymmetry there. I know in the 19th century people believed that when we accumulate wisdom, we also accumulate values and ethics. And it was comfortable for people to believe that until we saw the 20th century. Then we realized maybe accumulating knowledge gives you power. It doesn't always give you sensitivity. By the way, some people would argue the opposite. Yes.
So I'm curious, you talked a lot about space and time.
Yeah.
And Einstein, has all, built a whole theory out about the connection between space and time. Have you thought?
It's a good question. It's the way, I don't think space really shrunk. It's our experience of space that shrunk. Time didn't really expand. It's our experience. So I'm speaking from the point of view of how it's experienced. Now, I know there's all these crazy theories that the way I experience the world actually has an effect, quantum theory. But I try to keep, I want to share my understanding, my philosophic analysis separate from that. It's the way we experience life. We experience, America is probably the same distance from Israel physically. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's even a little bit more because the continents are set, whatever. But it's experienced as very, very close. And next year, physically, maybe next year is the same distance, but it's experienced as terrifyingly far away. So my whole spiel here today was from the point of view of our experience and not from the point of view of physics. And maybe if I'll ever take this one step forward, it will be interesting to think about this in light of modern physics, but it's not something that I did yet. Oh, so you're saying Einstein proves all this is so I'm for that. Yes.
Don't you think that, or do you think that another dimension of this conversation has to do with our perception and the reality of death? And that is, in linear time, there's a beginning and there's an end. In cyclical time, what was will be again. In biblical theology, the world was created, and there will be an end of days. And we live, part of the human condition is living with great anxiety about death. And it determines so much about our perception of time and how we use time and what the meaning of the moment is.
Well, it's very possible that one of the reasons why the temptation to believe in cyclical time is a way to deal with the fact that this is all going to end. Not the world, our experience of it, our awareness. It might end. And cyclical time, no. But part of the reasons why it helps you is not only because you deny the end, it's because you deny the uniqueness. Nothing unique is going to end. Nothing is So it's very possible that linear time creates anxiety. It creates the fear of dying. Maybe the fear of dying, as Franz Rosenzweig argued, and I learned from Rabbi West that also Leon Kass writes about this. The fear of dying, knowing that everything has an end, is what makes this life so valuable. Because when things are not limited, they're inflated. And only when something is limited, it has a sense of value. So maybe that's also an important piece of.
Then just add one more thing. That's why fundamentalists place such a strong emphasis on life after death.
Interesting, very interesting. Yes.
So this week, Alvin Toffler died, who was the creator of the term future shock, which we refer to, although we didn't use this terminology.
Future shock?
Future shock. It was a
Okay.
book in the 19th century in which life is moving faster than we can actually comprehend.
Wow.
Nevertheless, last night we talked about our grandchildren, and you said we can't even imagine 4 years from now. What makes you sure that our liturgy is going to stay so constant? If we look toward the future, must we insist that it remain in this state?
Let me make now an argument for not changing all our liturgy and our rituals. One would say, the world is changing, so we have to change our liturgy. We have to change our rituals. And I want to say exactly the opposite. The world is changing, and we have a need for islands that are stable in a changing world. We need moments that are familiar. So I would say, I think it's smart not to change. Let's not move to a high-tech sukkah next year. Let's stay in those pieces of wood or cloth. Let's do the same sukkah. So this is exactly what I'm saying. I think that, the world that's changing challenges us to change Judaism. I think so. Feminism is a great change, and in light of that, we have to consider change. But the world that changes is also a great argument not to change. And I think that's a balance we have to look for. I think when it comes to values, it has to enter a conversation. When it comes to rituals, I think there's the argument I'm trying to make is let's keep things familiar. We need it familiar. We need it similar. We need moments where, and I think it's important for our emotional stability, for our stability of our families. There's a lot to be said about this. The combination of linear time and cyclical calendar, I think, is a very important combination. There is a future, there is change, and within that, our changing experiencing of time, there's also very stable moments. That's, I think, the synthesis that we should keep alive. I think our Jewish tradition many times we're afraid of religious traditions because religious traditions are threatening. They're threatening. Sometimes they bring the worst out of us. They turn us into closed-minded people. They promote chauvinism and national. So we want to guard ourselves from religious traditions. But sometimes we have to, and I think that's true, we also have to think the world the other way around. Western secular civilization is also threatening. And the question is, how can we guard ourselves from that civilization using our tradition? Which means, I think, our most contemporary, challenge will be the following. How do we guard ourselves from our Judaism? And how do we guard ourselves using our Judaism? Does that make sense?
I could speak to that.
Okay.
I think there's at least 3 other remedies in the Bible for modernity. So one is instead of going from secular to religious time, we can go from secular to no time. Past and future walk together. Really think about more the kind of God we talk about. And that can give you a different perspective on the world. 2, we have rituals. So think of the Seder. On the Seder, everybody has to put down their smartphones, and you have to move across space and time back to the oppression and liberation of Egypt. And while you're there back in the past, you have children from the future asking questions. And what comes out of this is be kind to strangers because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. And the third thing is we don't know what the future will look like in 400 years, but but we do know what it's supposed to look like. And we are directed to use all of our powers, all of our technology, our feet and our hearts to get them to that ancient world to look like. Those are good remedies.
Okay. Thank you. That was a great declaration. Thank you. Thank you. I'll steal the idea.
I want to go back to the metaphysical discussion. So in modernity, science has come around to the view that nature is more linear than cyclical, through the idea of evolution, etc. Which could then imply that God need no longer be transcendent in order to be associated with a linear notion of time.
Yes.
It also suggests that possibly you could have a linear notion of time without God, because nature itself is that way. So I'd like to reflect.
No, I think that's true. I think we don't need today monotheism in order to create linear time. We don't need separation from nature. We just have to observe nature. I agree. I think we need monotheism today to remember that human beings are unique and separate, but we need that not to separate myself from nature. The equation flipped. I'm not controlled by nature. I think I control nature until nature will take revenge, but that's a different conversation. Yeah, I think we need monotheism today to build a healthier relationship with everything we've created. I think that's a better way to think about it. We used to need monotheism to have a healthy relationship with what God created. Now we need it to have a healthy relationship with what we created, not to be controlled by what we've done. Yes?
Spoke about linear time and cyclical time and the role of Judaism. But in this context apply to all religions, right? These are all monotheistic religions.
Yes.
Yes. People will turn to religion to deal with the unstable times.
Yes. If religion is about escaping change, then you slip and maybe into fundamentalism. But if religion is about injecting islands of change into a world you accept that changes, then I think it's not about destruction. It enriches your life, stabilizes your life, and enables you to grow. What? Thank you. Exactly what he said. Yeah.
I enjoy technology as much as everybody in this room, but I see technology as mortgaging our children's future. And what I'm referring to is global warming. So Jared Diamond writes a book called Collapse, in which he describes several societies who are at a threshold, and some of the societies completely collapsed, and others made a different decision to go forward. So what would I like to believe? I would like to believe that there will be a continuation of mankind in either, or humanity in some case. It might be linear, it could be cyclical, that we will completely collapse and there will be something completely different growing out of that.
I think we ran out of time. That's true. So I want to apologize to everyone who wanted to ask a question. But I want to use, what's your name? I want to use Steve's question just to close things. Is that okay? We use technology to control nature, and maybe that technology is threatening nature, or transforming the conditions of nature in a way that we won't be able to live on Earth anymore. And that awareness creates all the green movements to guard planet Earth, to guard nature from our technology. And that's very important. I just want another movement to be created. It's not the movement guarding nature from our technology. It's a movement guarding our psyche from our technology. Because the same technology that might be contaminating nature is also having an impact on the people that use technology. So I think we need double awareness to protect nature from what we've created and to protect ourselves from what we created. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. A philosopher that dealt with technology called Nussbaum has the following metaphor with this lens. He says, it's very weird to be anti-technology, and you shouldn't be anti-technology. It's impossible to be anti-technology. That would be like being anti-food. This is metaphor. No one's anti-food. But the fact that you're not anti-food doesn't mean you can't develop an awareness. How much you eat and what time you eat and what you eat. We shouldn't be anti-technology. But we can't be anti-technology. But that doesn't, we can't stop technology. That doesn't mean we can't develop an awareness to ask how much, on what timings, what time, what's the content. And I think this is a conversation we should start having. I think these are two conversations. Technology and nature, that's the green conversation. And technology and ourselves, that's the, I don't know, maybe it's the Shabbat conversation. Thank you.